We continue our conversations with all 17 of the candidates on the ballot for Denver mayor with Andy Rougeot, businessman, veteran, etc. Welcome to Next.
Thank you for having me.
So you are the only self-funding candidate in this race and the only registered Republican as well. I know that former President Donald Trump used to brag that his wealth meant that he couldn't be bought. Do you similarly think that your wealth means that you can't be influenced like others can?
So I'm proud to be someone who's not taking the fair election funds in this race. It means I'm not taking taxpayer dollars. For your viewers who are not familiar with it right now, that means where a $1 donation becomes a $9 donation. That is fueling the political ambitions of people running this race. It's being spent on things like liquor stores. It's being spent on double dipping, on paying staffers, both in your NGO and in your organization. It's being spent on cannabis-themed marketing events. So I'm proud I'm not taking those taxpayer dollars to further my political ambitions.
So the Fair Elections Fund was overwhelmingly supported by Denver voters who set it up, funded it, and what you're describing there are people paying for things that campaigns pay for. But your objection is that you would like to get rid of the system that Denver taxpayers set up?
So my objection is that the people of Denver, if you and I were to walk out on a Spear Boulevard right now, said, do you want to spend your taxpayer dollars at the liquor store? Not for your own beer, but for candidates. Do you want to spend your taxpayer dollars paying a staffer for a political campaign and having that staffer be paid by that NGO? Would you spend on cannabis-themed events? They would be amazed at how this money is being spent.
So your thought would be keep the Fair Election Fund, but restrict it to only the campaign expenses that you like? Where would you draw the line?
So I would go back to Denver voters, and I'd highlight how this is being abused by these other candidates, and I think we'd get rid of it.
Okay. So because you brought up the Fair Elections Fund, you claimed at one point that other mayoral candidates were paying themselves salaries out of the Fair Elections Fund. When we asked your campaign for evidence, your campaign said the money was being hidden through payroll firms. We looked. We found no evidence of this. Would you like to provide the evidence or apologize to the other folks in the race for suggesting this?
Yes. So to be clear, people are not paying themselves salaries.
Why did you say that?
They are spending money on things like liquor stores.
If they're not paying themselves salaries, why did you say that?
They are spending their money on things like double dipping. If
it's not true, why did you say it?
So I'm telling you on how that system is being abused right now.
Correct. And I'm asking you to account for what you said. You accuse people of breaking campaign finance law. Why did you say it?
Yes. So I'm saying I was wrong. People are not paying themselves salaries. They are abusing the system.
Were you misinformed or did you make it up?
They are spending that money on abusive systems. This is a corrupt system.
Okay. Again, were you misinformed or did you make it up?
Again, I'm talking to you about the corruption of the Fair Election Fund.
And I'm asking you to account for your previous statement, and it was incorrect. I'm asking you, did you make it up or were you misinformed?
So, Kyle, I've given you an answer. I apologize if you don't like it.
Okay.
However, again,
it's important to voters to know if you're going to be mayor, whether you're somebody who has trouble processing the information that comes into you or whether you're somebody who makes things up. So, again, you accused your opponents of taking salaries from campaign funds. We know that's not true now, so I'm asking you, were you misinformed? Were you given bad information, or did you make it up?
Yeah, Kyle, I'm telling you, I misspoke. Candidates are not paying themselves salaries. They are abusing that system by paying at liquor stores, by spending that money on cannabis-themed events, by spending that money to double dip and pay staffers. That is corruption. That is unacceptable. Denver deserves a mayor who will actually fight for our future, who will change from these politicians who look at how they can line their own pockets. They look at how they can go on things like government-paid trips abroad. And they'll say, look, again, there's a good excuse on why Mayor Hancock is flying abroad. He's not going to go see a Broncos game. He is going to have, business meetings that will supposedly help DIA. Denver deserves a mayor who's different. Denver deserves a mayor who will add 400 police officers, enforce our camping ban, reduce the cost of housing. They deserve a mayor who's not going to say, here's how I can find something that's unethical but legal and stick to it.
So I think we've kind of shifted now from Fair Elections Fund to trips that the mayor has taken. But I mean, he went to London when the Broncos were playing in London, recently took the trip to Africa to solicit flights in. Are you saying that if you were elected mayor, you would not spend taxpayer funds on your own travel?
Correct. I'll pay for my own plane tickets.
Okay. How does it work if the mayor's not rich, though? I get it. Yes. You're the self-funder, but why should you understand what I'm saying? It's easy for you to say you pay for your own trips because you got a lot of money. But what if the next mayor doesn't have a lot of money?
So our mayor is paid almost $180,000.
Okay.
He is making enough money. He can pay for his own plane tickets.
Okay. And no matter who's elected the next Denver mayor, they can pay for their own plane
They're
tickets.
still being paid $180,000 a year. And I think it's ridiculous to ask the taxpayers of Denver, people who make much less than $180,000 a year, to subsidize corruption from our mayor. It's ridiculous to ask our taxpayers to pay for liquor stores, because those are going to donor events, like you talked about.
So you think that the travel is corruption? It's not just like a bad choice, but it's actual corruption.
So it is corruption if you're using taxpayer dollars for personal business. And if you're going to a Broncos game in London, I'm sure there were meetings that took place. However, The mayor can pay for his own ticket in that situation. Again, that is ridiculous. I can't believe anybody who's listening to this program wouldn't love to go to the Broncos game in London and maybe have a meeting while they're there and have it paid by the taxpayer.
Very good. Do you think that Mayor Michael Hancock's homeless sweeps have reduced homelessness?
So Mayor Hancock has not enforced our camping ban consistently. As mayor, I will enforce our camping ban consistently because that's the humane policy. So something you've asked other candidates to get people into the mental health and drug addiction services they need.
So again, the question is, do you think that his homeless sweeps have reduced homelessness?
So I don't think he's sweeping consistently. So he is not consistently enforcing our camping ban. When there's a major event, like the MLB All-Stars game, something that politically will look bad for him, he enforces the camping ban. Other than that, he doesn't do it. So we deserve a mayor who will actually consistently enforce our camping ban. And the reason why, again, this is compassion, is if someone is dealing with a severe mental health or drug addiction issue, they're suffering on the street, the best thing we can do for that person is get them into shelter. Because if it was my daughter who was dealing with a fentanyl addiction, I would want her to get in contact with her family again. I want her to get clean. And the way we do that is by getting them into the shelter system versus having them try to be treated out in a tent on the streets.
So what happens then when we come upon somebody who's living in an encampment and they're not interested in going into shelter, they're not interested in going to treatment? How would you handle that?
Yes. So I will consistently enforce the camping ban. That means enforcing our law. There is not an option if we have shelter beds open to say, I will break the law and I will sleep on the street. So as mayor, I will enforce that. So it starts off with a warning, turns into a ticket, and it can eventually be an arrest. And the reason why that's the humane policy for someone who's suffering from mental health or drug addiction is that gets them into the services they need.
It gets them into jail.
No, so I talked to a woman, for example, whose brother was suffering from schizophrenia. This is someone who nightly, he was lost to the streets. Her family prayed that he'd be arrested. The reason why is they were worried what he would do if he wasn't back on his meds. So if you have someone who's suffering like that, or someone who's suffering from fentanyl addiction that historically will kill them from an overdose, the best thing we can do is get them into a shelter, or if they're getting clean on a prison floor, that's a horrible place to be clean. That's better than overdosing and dying in our streets. And again, if it was my daughter, I would rather her get clean in a jail cell than I'd have her die in a tent.
So the Denver Sheriff's Department is understaffed by about 40% or so.
Yes.
Are they prepared to handle the influx of people that you would arrest and send to jail for being homeless?
So we've seen when we historically enforced the camping ban, prior to the previous 4 years, there was almost no arrests. Because once you start enforcing a law and it's known that you're enforcing a law, the amount of crime drops drastically. Just if like we were running through red lights. If I was consistently running through a red light and I was getting ticket after ticket after ticket, at some point I'd be arrested. If we stopped enforcing running through red lights, we'd see that increase in crime. So we need a mayor who will actually consistently enforce our law, consistently enforce the camping ban to fight for Denver's future.
So you don't think that the camping ban and the sweeps just chase people around in circles?
So if they're inconsistently enforced, like our current mayor is doing, I don't think it's helpful. Consistent, aggressive enforcement, that means night after night, so someone knows that this is a law that will be enforced. And that's why they have to use the shelter beds that are available. And we've seen it work in different cities. So you look at Colorado Springs, a city very similar to Denver. So actually should have higher homelessness per capita because they have a large veteran population. So I was stationed down in Fort Carson when I was in the Army. That has a significantly lower population of homeless than Denver per capita because they have aggressive enforcement of a sit-lie ordinance combined with a one-spot location with the Colorado Springs Rescue Mission and the associated wraparound services.
So if you're going to be sending more folks to jail for being homeless, would you then be adding services at the jail?
To start, we're not sending them to jail for being homeless. That is not true.
Well, because they're refusing your offer of services.
No, because they're breaking the law by camping. The vast majority of Denver homeless go into a shelter every night. They do not break the law. It is a small minority that is breaking a law by camping, just as a small minority by breaking the law by publicly defecating. So I have a beautiful park by my house. We live in the Highlands neighborhood. I'll go out with my 3-year-old in my arms to go out through a back gate, and I will see a man with his pants around his ankles using his restroom. And I'll have to turn with my 3-year-old, and she loves the swing, so it's her favorite thing in the world, in tears. You call 911, call the non-emergency hotline, nothing happens. We are not helping that person by letting that person deal with that drug addiction issue in the park by my house. We're not helping my neighbors by doing that. Enforcing the camping ban, enforcing our public decency laws are ultimately going to help that person by getting them the help they need.
So just to clarify, did you call 911 on somebody who's going to the bathroom outdoors?
Yes, because they had their pants around their ankles, defecating in my park with my little girl in my arms.
So that brings up an interesting question, because one thing other candidates are talking about is the lack of public restrooms in this city compared to others. And that forces people who are experiencing homelessness to go to the bathroom outdoors if they can't find a building that will allow them inside. So what do you think about the idea of adding public restrooms?
Immediately next to my neighborhood, there's a 7-Eleven across the street that has an available bathroom. There's a public library a few blocks away. So this was not a situation where someone was 15 blocks away from a restroom. This was someone who was clearly dealing with a severe drug addiction issue because we could see him using drugs. And this was the fence line right next to where he'd set up his stuff.
So what do you think about the idea of adding more publicly available restrooms in Denver?
I think the best thing to do is to get people into the service they need. So right now we have...
What if they just need a bathroom?
So yes, so if we get our bathrooms open again, the reason why Starbucks is closing its bathrooms, for example, the one on 30, that's the one that's on the intersection of 25 and 70, is the number of overdoses they had from the homeless in that bathroom. So they closed it down. They went to full drive-through status. If we can solve our homelessness problem by getting people into the mental health and drug addiction services they need, we can reopen the public bathrooms. Because for everybody, as a guy with 2 little girls, there's times when the little girls need to use the bathroom. I want to be able to go into a store and say, hey, can I use the restroom? To do that, the store needs to know that they're not going to have an issue with someone potentially overdosing there. So we need to make sure that we're getting people who are suffering from these issues, suffering from fentanyl addiction, suffering from mental health, into the services they need. Because otherwise, we're just pushing that onto 7-Elevens, our public libraries, all those sort of issues.
Mm-hmm. But your thought is that it's not a good idea to alleviate the pressure on those private businesses by adding more public restrooms, as some others are suggesting.
I think the best solution is to actually help the people with what they're suffering with. So treat the actual cause, not the symptom.
Okay. A question related to the urban camping ban that's actually a question about character. So you falsely claimed that you were the only mayoral candidate who will enforce the urban camping ban. The following candidates have also said that they will enforce the camping ban. I'm going to list them for the audience. Yes. Mike Johnson, Chris Hansen, Kelly Brough, Debbie Ortega, Kwame Spearman, Thomas Wolfe, Trini Rodriguez, Robert Trita, and Aurelio Martinez. Why say something that's so obviously not true?
So I disagree with you there, which is hopefully pretty clear. Other candidates may say they'll enforce the camping ban. I'm the only one who will. So when you have someone like Kelly Brough, who you just listed, who has changed her position on this issue, who I think to your own organization said she was unsure if they've overfunded or underfunded police, you cannot trust that person when they're mayor or a career politician to actually enforce the law. Because our current mayor says he will enforce the camping ban. He doesn't. We need somebody different, somebody who's experienced as a business person, as a veteran, as a father, and is committed to it. Because look, me and you are talking about this. We're not ducking around the issue. And you have other candidates who, in different forums, will say different things. We had a homeless community forum downtown where I clearly said I will enforce the camping ban. And I was booed for a minute straight. But my answer was the same there. Other candidates' answers got fluffier and harder to understand. So people of Denver will know when I say something, I'm actually going to do it.
So, that's a pretty striking thing to say. You're saying you're the only mayoral candidate who will actually enforce the urban camping ban. 9 other candidates are saying it, but you're saying all 9 of them are lying.
Yes, and we see our current mayor says he will enforce the camping ban, and he doesn't. I think anybody who says, I see a politician who's making a promise they haven't cared about in the past, and suddenly I believe them they're going to actually execute this when it's going to be hard, when they're going to see opposition, I don't think you can trust those people.
I want to ask you about public safety. So traffic deaths are at an all-time high since Denver implemented its Vision Zero plan. How would you bring down the number of traffic deaths in Denver?
Yes. So we need to enforce our laws. That looks like adding 400 police officers. It means increasing funding for our police. It means fixing a 911 system that's broken. So that's why, as mayor, I'll fight for Denver's future by doing that, by adding those 400 police officers. Because we have an intersection on 38th and Sheridan, close to my house. We had a bicyclist killed there. 2 cars had ran through the red light. Something where that person hasn't been arrested, they're hit and runs. If we have a police officer there, we will keep that from happening. Changing the speed, adding a bike lane, won't keep that from happening. We need to make sure we have those 400 police officers. That's why I'm going to add those as mayor.
So you think the way to reduce traffic deaths is to saturate the city with more
is enforcement of our traffic laws. So if we are enforcing speeding, we're enforcing running red lights, we will keep people from being hit by cars. That's important.
So you falsely claim that we're having a spike in pedestrian deaths, mostly caused by homeless individuals cutting across busy streets. The Denver Medical Examiner says that people experiencing homelessness didn't make up the majority of pedestrian deaths in 2022 or 2021 or 2020.
I also disagree with you there.
They said that the statistic that you're citing is not just pedestrian deaths, but you rolled in other forms of death, blunt force trauma like suicides and falls and people hit by trains.
Yes.
So have you changed how you gather information based on all of these instances where you've gathered bad info and then said things that aren't true?
So I think you're also wrong in this situation. So if you look at the number of pedestrian deaths we had in 2022, and the reason why this comes up is I heard a story, talking to a woman. She had a gentleman, a homeless gentleman, who...
With respect, you're offering me an anecdote, and I'm talking to you about the statistics that prove that you're wrong.
I'm answering your question, so we're going to talk about...
We're not going to have statistics do debate with an anecdote. The Denver Medical Examiner says what you're saying is factually untrue. You said that we're having a spike of pedestrian deaths, mostly caused by homeless individuals cutting across streets. That's not supported by the Medical Examiner statistics.
It is supported by the Medical Examiner statistics. The Medical Examiner statistics. So as the information I sent to your organization prior to this fact check, There is a blunt force deaths, which is a horrible thing that happened. That's led to the death of 16 homeless people in 2022.
Which is more than just car accidents.
Yes, it also includes train accidents, as your organization pointed out, or falls by suicide. There is no train deaths in the city of Denver in 2022. We can eliminate that. There's no reported deaths of suicides by falls. I talked to multiple organizations. They had no reports of those as well. So the remaining bucket there is pedestrian deaths. Those are people crossing the street. So this is why
this is an uncomfy thing to do here in public, but you're wrong again, because the medical examiner went through each of the autopsy reports to provide us with the cause of death.
And what cause of death?
That's what we're basing our statistics on when I tell you that the medical examiner says that people experiencing homelessness did not make up the majority of pedestrian deaths in all of these various years. So I'm asking you again.
So for 2022,
have you changed how you gather information based on, in this instance and in the instance of the claim that people are illegally paying themselves campaign salaries? Have you changed how you gather information if you routinely are getting caught saying things that aren't true?
So I don't believe I'm incorrect on 2022. If you have different information than I have, I'd love you to send it to me. So if the medical examiner specifically sent your organization cause of death for 2022 by a homeless person, but their actual publicly available data that any citizen of Denver could go look up right now has that blunt force deaths cause.
Correct. That number is misleading, which is why we had to ask them for the autopsy numbers to actually break it down, because you were lumping in all those statistics together. It feels like we've exhausted that topic.
Yeah, it seems like we have a disagreement there, but I'd love to see what information your team actually has.
Several candidates in the race have said that they would enlarge the Denver Police Department beyond its current authorized force of 1,600 officers. When you talk about adding 400, you're adding 400 from where we are today, or adding 400 on top of the 1,600?
So from the budgeted 1,600.
So up to 2,000?
Yes.
If we can't hire 1,600 for a variety of reasons, how do we hire 2,000?
Yeah. So when I talk to current officers today, I talk to former chiefs, they tell me the issue is not a pay issue. So it's not a wage rate issue. It's a lack of support from the mayor. So I think that it's the belief that they can't do their job. So we deserve a mayor who will actually support our police officers. Because if we support our police officers, then we can staff our office. We can make sure that they have the ability to respond when there's an emergency. My immediate next door neighbor on Christmas Eve had 4 people jump their fence, try to pry open their back door. They called 911, they sat on hold, and they had to wait for a cruiser to show up on Christmas Eve. That's a memory that family will have the rest of their life. So adding those 400 police officers means that we can have a quick response time when we have crime in our city.
How do you think that Mayor Hancock has been insufficiently supportive of police?
So when I talk to officers, they will tell me that there's a belief that the mayor will throw them under the bus the first chance they have. That's a just widespread belief among the department.
For doing nothing wrong, or when they say open fire on a crowd in Lodo?
For doing nothing wrong. There's a belief that they can't enforce our laws. A great example of this is non-pursuit of not pursuing fleeing suspects of nonviolent crimes. So when a car is stolen, a police officer pulls behind it, that car then guns it through a red light. Our officers typically will not be able to pursue that car. Understandably, our officers are frustrated by that. There is a good reason for that, saying that, hey, if we're pursuing a fleeing car, there's a worry that there could be accidental damage. However, that thief will steal car after car after car. We are creating incentive for them thus to flee from the police. And the police officer then is responding to that call, and he has to tell the person whose car has been stolen, that potentially is missing their job, hey, I saw the bad guy, saw your car, but nothing we can do about it. And our police want to serve. They want to help. So when we have officers who are leaving our department and going to be our firefighters, which is fully staffed, they're going to be paramedics because they want to help, they want to serve. We are losing that as a city because we're not properly supporting our police.
So when you talk about issues like that, would you as mayor then get involved in the police tactics of things like whether you're pursuing stolen cars?
Yes, I think the mayor should be involved in use of force. And I think that's not unique in me in terms of saying that the mayor has a role to play in the policy as our police department utilizes.
I'd love to hear more about that in terms of what specific policy changes you would like to see around use of force beyond just pursuing stolen cars.
So that's the one that immediately comes to mind. But my experience as an Army officer, I'm very familiar with use of force rules, obviously in very different situations. So it's something that I would hope to have a very good conversation with my chief of police, saying, let's go through this, what is helping, what is hurting, and obviously what is the cost-benefit analysis behind these different issues.
So Mayor of Denver doesn't have direct impact on state affairs, but you'd have a big bully pulpit to be heard on things like that. Right now, state legislature is considering a ban on so-called assault weapons. Would you support that?
So I don't know enough about that bill. I would take my cue from Governor Polis, who appears to be against it. However, I can't say that we're not currently enforcing our gun laws. So I think the key thing that you can do as mayor is get illegal guns off our streets. So right now, we are not making enough of effort to get those guns out of convicts' hands. So like we passed, for example, a ghost gun ban, bump stock ban. Good laws, but no deaths that were caused by either ghost guns or bump stocks in the times it's passed. Instead, we need to actually enforce our laws. We need to have enough police officers. That's why I will add 400 police officers to enforce those laws. And that's really the key, and putting pressure on our DA to actually prosecute criminals versus, I think, additional laws if they're not enforced.
I mean, that's a heck of a message that you're sending to Colorado's rural sheriffs about enforcing the law, because obviously we've reported how they won't they won't enforce the mag ban.
So I'm running for Denver mayor.
Yeah. You're just talking about Denver. You're talking about you want Denver to enforce laws. You're talking statewide.
I'd hope everybody would enforce the law, but my purview as the Denver mayor will be the Denver police enforcing the law.
Fair enough. State legislature is also considering a bill that would allow local municipalities to opt in to rent control.
Yes.
This is a two-part question. What do you think about the idea of municipalities being able to opt in if they want? And then would you want Denver to opt in?
So I'm okay with municipalities being able to opt in. I think it's a horrible idea to have rent control. The reason why is we do have a lack of affordable housing in our city. Blue-collar workers, young families, first-time home buyers can't afford to live here. However, the solution to that is building more housing. It's getting rid of regulations, increasing the cost of housing. It's fixing a broken permitting department. I think we've seen that rent control hasn't worked abroad, it hasn't worked nationwide, so I don't think we should institute it in the city.
Could you name some of the specific policies that you think are slowing down the building of affordable housing?
Yes. So if we look at a permitting department which is broken, so that is paying for land while you're waiting for a stamp of approval from the government. You can talk about ADU height restrictions. So right now we restrict the height of ADU to 1.5 stories tall because there's an angle roof instead of a flat roof. That increases the cost. We have parking minimums. We have separate hookup requirements. So all those things are adding the cost of building those starter homes. Also, we have building codes as well that can be changed, makes our housing uglier even in some ways. So those are changes that can be made that can actually increase the housing stock for those blue-collar workers, young families, first-time home buyers.
One of the big debates that we're having within the candidates in the race is whether every neighborhood in Denver is well-suited for density and affordable housing. What do you think?
I think every neighborhood in Denver should welcome blue-collar workers, young families, first-time home buyers, be that with denser or more affordable housing.
Should Denver resume cooperation with Immigration and Customs Enforcement?
I think I was pretty clear on our answer. I think we should be a sanctuary city. What we do need to do, though, is actually enforce our laws on crime. So it's adding those 400 police officers, make sure we're properly funding our police. I think we're wasting resources if we're chasing, good citizens of this country, or not good immigrants to this country who are, working to provide for their families.
So just because that's we should not resume cooperation
Yes.
with ICE. Okay. Last question for you. We always try to end with kind of a horse race question. Is it weird being the only Republican in a race where so many Democrats are running on what are traditionally Republican ideas? Tough on crime, crack down on homelessness, more police officers, that kind of thing. There's a ton of candidates running on the exact same stuff.
So I actually feel very unique. And when I'm in these forums, I feel like I'm the odd man out because I am clearly saying I want to add 400 police officers, while you have other candidates who will sort of waffle on, hey, do we need more police, less police? And
there's 6 of them that want to hire more police.
And even them won't say specifically how many, what the mix is. You have clearly enforced the camping ban, and we have making housing more affordable. My background is not a politician. I'm a business owner. I'm a veteran, I'm a father. So I think those things make me unique, and I sort of see those as the big divide versus something else.
Andy Rougeot, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.